The city inspector showed up at 7:18 on a Tuesday morning, carrying a clipboard, a yellow folder, and the kind of expression people wear when they expect to find a disaster. I was in my driveway in sweatpants, barefoot, holding a coffee mug and staring at him like he had the wrong address. He looked past me at the house, then down at the paperwork, then back at me. "Mr. Nolan Mercer?" "Yeah." "We received a complaint regarding unsafe structural alterations, illegal electrical modifications, stormwater diversion, code violations, and possible unauthorized occupancy." I remember blinking at him once, then twice, because for one ridiculous second, I actually wondered if someone had confused my house with a meth lab. I looked over my shoulder at the place I'd spent the last year rebuilding after my divorce. Fresh trim, clean siding, new gutters, a small detached workshop out back. Nothing dramatic, nothing illegal. Just a quiet house in a quiet subdivision outside Charlotte, North Carolina. Then I saw her, standing at the corner of the sidewalk in a pale blue cardigan with her hands folded like she was attending a church picnic. Diane Holloway, my neighbor, my HOA president, and the woman who had just tried to weaponize the city against me. She gave me the smallest smile. Not friendly, not smug exactly. Worse than that, satisfied. Like she'd finally found the button she thought would make my life collapse. That was the moment I understood this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. And what Diane didn't know, what she should have known before she sent the city crawling through my property on a stack of lies, was that I had documented every permit, every inspection, every contractor invoice, every HOA letter, and every single conversation she'd tried to turn into a threat. She thought a city report would scare me. What it actually did was drag an official witness onto my property right as her own harassment campaign was about to unravel. By the end of that month, Diane wasn't the one watching my house from behind her curtains anymore. She was the one sitting in a board meeting while the neighborhood learned exactly what she'd done, and none of it went the way she expected. My name is Nolan Mercer, and I bought my house in the Briar Glen community after my marriage ended and most of my old life went with it. I didn't buy the place because it was fancy. I bought it because it felt quiet. Single-story brick ranch, deep driveway, decent backyard, a detached workshop I could fix up with my hands when my head got too loud. After a divorce, quiet matters. You stop caring about upgraded countertops and start caring about whether a place feels like it belongs to you when the sun goes down. For the first 6 months, Briar Glen was fine. Annoying in the normal HOA way, but fine. Then Diane Holloway became HOA president. If you've never lived near someone like Diane, here's the easiest way to explain her. She treated neighborhood rules like a private weapon she rented out to herself. She was in her late 50s, always perfectly dressed, always smiling with only the top half of her face, and she had a way of talking that made every sentence sound like a disciplinary memo pretending to be polite. The first time she came to my door, I was halfway through repainting the workshop trim. She stood there holding a folder and said, "I wanted to discuss a few community concerns." "About what?" She glanced past me toward the backyard. "The detached structure, visible work materials, and whether the changes underway have architectural approval." I wiped paint off my hand onto a rag. "The workshop was there before I bought the house." "Yes," she said smoothly, "but modifications affect neighborhood character." That phrase told me everything. Neighborhood character. People like Diane always hide control inside vague language. They never say, "I don't like that you make decisions without me." They say things like character, harmony, standards, community values. I told her I had permits for the electrical upgrades, approval for the roof repair, and city clearance for the workshop improvements. She smiled. "Well, that should be easy to confirm." At the time, I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't even the beginning. The letters started a week later. First, an HOA reminder that external project staging should be minimized. Then a notice asking whether I had approval for structural alterations visible from neighboring lots. Then a warning about possible unapproved utility modifications. That last one annoyed me enough to call the management office directly. The poor woman who answered sounded exhausted. After a long pause, she admitted there was no active violation file against me, just repeated homeowner complaints. I asked who was making them. She wouldn't say. She didn't need to. I already knew. Diane had decided my house was a problem, not because it was unsafe, because I wasn't asking for her permission to improve it. The real issue, I later learned, was the workshop. It sat near the rear line between my lot and Diane's corner angle, and once I replaced the old warped siding and added a clean charcoal paint finish, it actually looked better than the one behind her house. That mattered to her more than it should have. Everything with Diane was about hierarchy. Whose house looked better? Whose yard felt more controlled? Who had enough status to make rules feel personal? And the moment she sensed I didn't care about her approval, she shifted from annoying to invasive. One Saturday morning, I came outside to find her standing at my side yard fence, with a man from the landscaping committee, both of them staring toward the workshop. "Can I help you?" I asked. She didn't move. "We're evaluating runoff concerns." "From my workshop?" "It may be affecting drainage perception." Drainage perception. That may still be the dumbest phrase I've ever heard in real life. "There is no runoff issue," I said. She gave me that small, patient smile. Sometimes these things aren't obvious to the homeowner. That was the first moment I wanted her off my property in a way that felt physical, not violent, just immediate. A deep instinctive need to remove her from my air. I told them both to leave. She did, but not before turning and saying, "The city takes these things more seriously than HOAs do." At the time, I thought it was a bluff. 3 weeks later, the city inspector was in my driveway. Back on that Tuesday morning, I took a slow breath, set my coffee on the porch rail, and asked the inspector what exactly was reported. He opened the yellow folder. Unsafe electrical work in accessory structure. Illegal occupancy in detached building. Unpermitted roof changes. Drainage redirection toward neighboring lots. And an enclosed area allegedly being used in a way that violates setback and code requirements. I stared at him. Then I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. "There's no occupancy in the workshop," I said. "It's a workshop. The electrical was permitted, the roof was permitted, and the drainage was corrected by a licensed contractor 6 months ago." He nodded in a way that suggested he'd heard many stories before. "Do you have documentation?" "Yes." Diane shifted on the sidewalk. That tiny movement told me she hadn't expected him to ask so quickly. "Great," I said. "Come on in." I took him through everything. Permit folder, contractor invoices, inspection sign-offs, photos from before and after, drainage work records, electrical final approval. He moved through it all carefully, professionally, taking notes. Then we walked the property. He checked the workshop panel, opened the side access, looked at the trench line by the gutters, measured the setback from the rear fence, took one look at the inside of the workshop. Benches, tools, storage racks, zero evidence of occupancy, and his whole expression changed. Not frustration, recognition. The kind that says, "I know exactly what this is now." When we stepped back into the driveway, Diane was still there. Still pretending to be casual. Still pretending she just happened to be outside during a city inspection she had absolutely orchestrated. The inspector looked at her and asked, "Are you the reporting party?" She smiled. "I'm just a concerned neighbor and HOA representative." That word, representative, did a lot of work for her. It always did. He asked, "Did you personally observe illegal occupancy?" She hesitated, then said, "There were indications." "Such as?" "Lights at odd hours, extended time spent in the structure, increased utility use." I actually turned and looked at her. "Lights at odd hours? I work in my shop. Sometimes late." That was her evidence. A man using his own property. The inspector wrote something down. Then he asked, Did you enter the property to verify any of these concerns? Diane smiled carefully. Only visually, from common areas. That was a lie. A stupid one. And I had proof. I didn't say anything until the inspector finished his initial notes. Then I asked him to wait one more minute. I went inside, opened the clip folder on my phone, and came back out. I think you should see something, I said. First clip. 2 weeks earlier, Diane opening my side gate and stepping 3 feet into the yard with her phone out, taking pictures toward the workshop. Second clip, Diane and the landscaping guy standing near the downspout while she said, "If the city sees enough irregularity, they'll force him to stop." Third clip, a Sunday evening clip from the driveway camera where Diane was talking to another board member and said the sentence that finished her. "Once code enforcement gets involved, he won't have the stomach to keep pushing." The inspector watched the videos without speaking. Then he asked me to send them to the email address on his card. Diane's face changed. Not dramatically, but enough. That smooth, well-managed expression cracked around the edges. "This is being taken out of context," she said. The inspector closed the folder. "Ma'am, context usually helps." That may have been the finest sentence I'd heard all year. He didn't cite her then, didn't accuse her outright. But when he left, he told me 2 important things. First, there were no visible violations. Second, he would be noting that the complaint appeared unsupported and that documented neighbor interference might be relevant if additional reports followed. That was city language for, "I know someone is using us." Diane walked back to her house without looking at me, which, honestly, worried me more than if she'd started screaming. Because people like Diane rarely stop after one failed move. They escalate. And she did. That same evening, I got an email from the HOA. Subject line, "Urgent architectural concern." The message said the board had received new questions about my workshop exterior, drainage profile, and possible utility modifications. Too fast. Far too fast. Which told me Diane was trying to create parallel pressure now that the city route hadn't worked. I forwarded the email to my attorney, Rachel Boone, who had already helped me answer earlier HOA nonsense. She called within the hour. Did the inspector close it? Informally, yes. And now the HOA wants another angle. Looks like it. She was quiet for a second, then said, "Good." Good? She's panicking. That's the thing about overconfident people. They don't know how to retreat cleanly. Once a tactic fails, they don't step back. They double the noise and hope volume becomes truth. Rachel sent the HOA a preservation notice the next morning. Every internal email, complaint, text, and architectural review note tied to my house had to be retained. That one letter changed the temperature in Briar Glen instantly. Because once preservation enters the room, everyone who casually nodded along to a bully starts remembering exactly what they wrote. And apparently, what they wrote was bad. Very bad. 3 days later, one of the HOA board members resigned. 2 days after that, Rachel got a packet through informal discovery from the management company. Inside were email chains, notes, board discussion threads, and the thing that destroyed Diane's whole story, an email she'd sent before calling the city. "If we document enough suspicion, code enforcement will create leverage where courtesy has failed." Leverage, not safety, not compliance, not concern, leverage. Another message described my workshop as a visual challenge to neighborhood consistency. That was it. That was the real crime in Diane's mind. My house looked improved without being improved through her. Rachel loved it. "This is selective harassment with a paper trail," she said. "Can we actually do something with it?" She laughed. "Oh, Nolan. We're going to do several things with it." She filed a demand for the HOA to withdraw all active concerns, cease direct targeting, and acknowledge that the city complaint had no code basis. She also warned of claims for harassment, interference with property rights, and abuse of enforcement authority. The board blinked. Diane didn't. because of course she didn't. Instead, she made the biggest mistake of all. She replied from her personal email. One sentence. Some owners only respond when pressure becomes official. Rachel called me immediately. That, she said, is not the sentence of an innocent person. The hearing with the HOA board was scheduled for the following Thursday. Not court yet, but close enough to hurt. The room was packed. Management rep. 2 board members who suddenly looked terrified. Rachel, me, Diane, and about a dozen residents who had apparently heard enough rumors to treat the whole thing like live theater. Rachel presented everything cleanly. Permits, city records, inspection sign-offs, inspector notes, then Diane's trespass clips, then the email chains, then the leverage line, then the pressure becomes official line. By the time she was done, the room had gone dead silent. Diane tried to talk about neighborhood standards, about precedent, about visual inconsistency, about her duty to act. Rachel shut that down with a single question. Can you identify one actual code violation found by the city? Diane said nothing. Can you identify one HOA covenant breached by Mr. Mercer's permitted improvements? Still nothing. Then what exactly were you trying to accomplish? That was when Diane made the mistake that ended her. She answered honestly. Control had to come from somewhere. No one moved. No one spoke. You could feel the whole room understand her all at once. This had never been about the house. It had been about control. And she had just said it out loud. The board voted that same night to withdraw all pending concerns, issue a written acknowledgement that my improvements were compliant, and review Diane's conduct as president. She resigned 4 days later for personal reasons. That's always the phrase, isn't it? Personal reasons. As if the reason wasn't that everyone finally saw who you were. These days, the workshop is finished. Clean shelves, proper wiring, good light, no letters taped to anything. Sometimes I stand in the driveway early in the morning and remember that first inspection day. The yellow folder, Diane's little smile, the way she thought the city would become a weapon she could point at my house. Instead, she pointed it at herself. Because the problem with using authority as a threat is that real authority keeps records. And records don't care how polished you are. They don't care how often you say community or standards or concern. They care what happened. And what happened was simple. Diane Holloway reported my house to the city. Then everything backfired. How did you like the story? Subscribe to my YouTube channel.